So for me, the career path for me when I was a coach is pretty simple. I always loved athletics. I always loved sports, and I realized that the political world that I was involved in wasn't going to be something that I was going to be able to do and sustain with the people who I was spending time with. And I realized that those people were not people that I wanted to attach my name to. I felt like I needed more in life out of that. And I always was a very competitive person. And part of it also was the demons that I had to deal with as an athlete too, where, I felt like there were things that I was shortchanged on that I don't want other people to have to experience. And if I can avoid that, reduce that as much as I possibly can, I want to try to do that. And Steve Warren, who's the boys coach here forever, has been so positive in my experiences that I thought it would be a really great idea to volunteer for him, you know, and because he was always a moral man, and whether or not I was always on the same page with him, X's and O's and things like that. I thought who better to learn from than a person of that quality. And I realized after about a week and a half, man, I'm enjoying this much for doing this little, and I'm getting paid very little money also. But the pay wasn't what we get into coaching for. What we get into coaching for is, a truly, you wake up every day and you're actually impacting lives. You're actually making a difference. And there's very, very few careers where that takes place. And for me, that was really rewarding. And I thought, man, if I could do this for an hour and a half a day and I'm enjoying it this much, not getting paid even to do it, how cool would it be to be able to do it 8, 9, 10, 11 hours a day and make it a career where every day I wake up and I know I have purpose. That's really rewarding, And so far, even in the most challenging kids in a classroom, the most difficult kids in the classroom, it's still worth it. I still wake up and I'm still excited every day to go in and get to work, and change lives and impact them in terms of culture. And then, on the performance end of things, every year it's a puzzle, every year it's a challenge, every year, it brings new opportunities and new difficulties that, again, can be sometimes stressful, but also entertaining. How do you convince the kid to come back out and realize, hey, you're going to have, maybe not this year, but by the time you're a senior, you're going to come away and be one of the best people we've ever had, one of the fastest people we've ever had. But more importantly, you're going to be able to assume a leadership role beyond anything you ever expected. We had a young lady who just was awarded our MVP of our cross country season, and she didn't run cross country freshman year. She barely was going to run track, and it was her friend who convinced her to come out. She thought she was going to be a cellist, and she's still a great cellist. But now, the University of Illinois wants her to run. And that's Big Ten track and field. A girl who thought she was going to be a cellist and never ran cross country, who now has developed over the course of 3 years to be an absolute stud. And it's not easy. It's not something simple. And I think that's one of the things as a coach. I want to make sure that kids understand that there's really something beautiful in struggling. And if things are easy, then what is it worth doing? And if it was simple, then you don't have a good respect for the process, and then you can't help people who will later on face the same challenges and difficulties, and you'll have no roadmap in how to do it. I tell kids all the time when they come and talk to me about different things, or they're going to make different decisions. This has nothing just to do with coaching. This can be just life and everything else. Like I try to tell them, like, look, at this point, I've vicariously lived 1,000 lives through high school. Through seeing what's going on, experiencing what's going on as kind of an observer, this omniscient, watchful eye. And so I try to tell kids, hey, if you're making a mistake, I'm going to let you know that I think you're making a mistake. And they may perceive it as, well, he just wants me to work really hard in his class, or he just wants me to be, part of his track team so he can score a couple extra points. But in reality, it's like, no, I want you to stay away from drugs and alcohol and be fit and be healthy. And again, understand the beauty and the struggle so that when you reach real challenges with college, career, wife, husband, whatever, that you will have perspective that will allow you to better able to overcome those hurdles in life and difficulties. So those are the reasons why I think it's a beautiful thing to be a coach.
What career path have you taken to get to where you are?
So for me, when I was in high school and even in elementary school, I mean, this is going to be kind of a long story, but I'll try to cut it down as much as I can. You know, I was one of those kids that was very awkward, very nerdy, had very, very few friends. And luckily enough, I chose good parents who gave me good genetics and raised me pretty well that, you know, over time, I grew into, and I was an early mature, so I was bigger, stronger, and faster than everybody in my grade. And through sports, that developed a social circle for me to know what it's like to have friends and to you know have positive relationships and to be goal orientated and things like that. And you know, so that led into high school, and I was very successful as a freshman in high school again because I was more mature than everybody else. But then, you know, I suffered a lot of injuries, and that was one of the things that was a big influence on me as a demon, if you will. I always say, be thankful for your demons because, you know, those things sometimes really steer you in a direction that will allow you to help other people later. And so that was always a struggle that I had, and it was a frustration that I had. So that led me to do a lot of research and, you know, just a personal interest and a hobby to kind of understand, well, what are the best people in the world doing? How are they training? How are they working out? And so then I kind of, in college, once I got to college, became kind of a coach's nightmare. You know, I was talented, but often injured and a know-it-all, you know. And so I still had a relatively decent experience in college at a very low level, Division III. But I ran decent times. I ran a lot faster than I ran in high school, so that felt rewarding. And that allowed me again to have a social circle in college. But at this point, you know, I was a totally different person. You know, I was the president of my college, student body president, was president of my fraternity. And so when I was ready to graduate, I wanted to get into politics. Sports really wasn't a thing. It was something that I did. It was something that I enjoyed. I looked at it as a hobby, but it wasn't something that I thought that I was going to do permanently. Because, you know, I wasn't obviously good enough to be a professional. Heck, I wasn't good enough to be a Division III All-American due to injuries and things like that. But when I graduated college, I worked on a number of political campaigns in a number of different organizations, and I realized that those people didn't really represent me the way that I wanted them to. And one of the guys actually owed me money. You know, he was a state representative, and he promised me that he was going to pay me a bunch of money, and he was a good friend at the time, so I thought he was a man of his word, and he wasn't. You know, and he owed me, you know, a couple $1,000, and he only paid me a couple $100. And at that point, I was like, man, I need a different, you know, direction. And what ended up happening is obviously that, you know, I decided to go volunteer for Coach Warren, as we already talked about. And the year later, the girls' position opened up. A coach who used to be there for a couple of years, who had really built up a decent base in terms of what they were able to accomplish, was a pretty good starting point for me, and it was very attractive because there were a couple girls on that team individually who were really great. Unfortunately, though, for me, you know, what happened is that I was really successful right away, which actually was a bad thing. And just like I said, I didn't have to struggle. I didn't know what it was like to build up athletes. I didn't know what it was like to actually develop a program. I just basically inherited these really, really amazing athletes, and I didn't screw them up, and we worked really hard, and we ran really fast, and broke a bunch of records, which made me hungry and made me want to continue the success, but I didn't really even have a clue why we were successful. So then it took me 3 years to basically realize and admit what I didn't know that I didn't even know. You know, I didn't even know what I didn't know, you know, and I was lucky enough to meet Sean Burris and to get to see and experience different coaches and different people over time. And then I just said, you know what, I'm going to use kind of my political background and the things that I was trained to do to work on political campaigns, start trying to develop some relationships and some influence, around my community. So it started off local, with some of the best coaches in the St. Louis area. Like I said, Sean Burris, if you look at records and training and all this kind of stuff, he was the guy, he was the man. And he made me realize that, kids can work really hard, a lot harder than they ever knew they could work. And on top of that, they can make vast improvements, and not just improve in high school, but then continue to keep running fast in college if they have someone who can take the baton of training and continue. Then I started networking outside and talking to some different coaches that I really liked, and I wasn't afraid to make a phone call. If there was a coach out there, Dr. Daniels, who wrote the running formula for distance runners, I'd call him up, I'd harass him and say, hey man, can I pick your brain? And that allowed me to develop a philosophy over time that I think was very successful. Coaches' education is helpful too. If the organization that you want to be a part of or a sport you want to be a part of has an educational component to it, that's another way to network, but it's also another way to, get cut through the BS and really figure out, like, this is what the body does for our sport, and this is the way that you take advantage of the body to be very successful through sport. And that helped a lot, doing the USATF level 2 training for sprints, relays, and then hurdles, and then going on and doing the endurance. And then there again, you meet a lot of coaches who are very successful and interested in the same thing. And so it's kind of, you create this brain trust of people in your circle that you can bounce ideas off of back and forth. One of the coolest things a coach ever told me, and he was one of the coaches for the really, really successful Poly High School in California. It was a really great quote. And he said, if you're the smartest guy in your circle, you need a new circle, because you're never getting challenged, and what's going to end up happening is everybody in your circle is going to be a taker. And so that's not where real success happens. Real success happens from when you're kind of challenged, people present new ideas, and then also, again, vicariously, other people's success really pushes you to keep maintaining your level of success and keep your drive up and keep your push up. And so I've been very lucky to have a lot of friends, internationally, nationally, and then locally, who kind of provide that motivation for me all the time. And so that's kind of where the process of kind of why I became a coach and what I wanted to do. And most importantly, like, I always felt, kind of going back to, being the head coach of the girls program here, I always felt like the girls were kind of underrepresented in terms of sports. And I always felt like the boys' sports were great, got a lot of attention, and I always was frustrated when I was in high school here, because I went to school here, as you know, that the girls weren't seeming to have the same equal success. And to me, that was frustrating. I wanted to make sure that the girls were a big deal also, and I wanted people that outside of our school go, man, Parkway Central is really good. And I want the kids to know that at the other schools. I want them to hear our name and go, man, that's a good program. And then if I think I've accomplished that, then I think I've really done something that's worth admiring and feeling really good about.
You touched on how you develop your philosophy. What would you say it is?
Well, for me, limits are more perceived than they are physical barriers. I believe that over time, kids and training and coaching, you can outwork a lot of people. And that doesn't mean you have to go out there and you have to, more is better. That's not necessarily the thing that I'm talking about. But what I'm saying is the consistent effort of doing what you need to do on a daily basis to create great change over a very long timeline. If you look at, like, endurance sports, the aerobic system takes an incredibly long time to develop. And truthfully, the aerobic system, to my knowledge, really still hasn't been maximized by people. There's people doing things all the time that are really impressive, regardless of PEDs and drug usage and all that kind of stuff. And then in the world of sprinting, if you look at the neurological system, I touched on this at the previous conference, is that you've got the substance called myelin, and myelin's kind of the tubing that wraps around your neurons. It kind of takes you from like slow speed dial-up internet to like USB, whatever they call it, fiber optic internet. It really can improve that much, and the body's a wonderful machine. But in order for that improvement to come, you've got to wrap that myelin around those neurons over a really, really long period of time. And so what's interesting is people think, oh, you're either really fast and you're born that way, or you're not. Well, if you look at kind of that training idea that Coach Burris does, where you're talking about high intensity reps over a great distance, or just consistent high intensity work throughout the year, the body eventually, that becomes the new normal. But it's so subtle that you don't recognize it while you're in the process. It's only after a long period of time of consistent work with people over 4 or 5 years that eventually you see that improvement. It's kind of like if you, in a weird way, you can kind of equate it to you lose weight and you're losing weight over a long period of time. It's not very drastic. Somebody who sees you 5 years later go, holy cow, man, you look amazing. Where the person that's with you every day in that gym with you while you're losing weight and, you're trimming off a pound every month or so, they're not really able to see that as much until they look back at old pictures and go, wow, that's where you're at. Well, we in the sport world, especially in track and field, what's great about it is you have numbers. And so you can look at somebody like Amani Maitan, who is your teammate, who's running 13:75 FAT in summer track, and by the time she was out of here, she ran 12:31 FAT, no win. And you look at that and you're like, that's somebody who's already in shape, who was already running, she was already spending a lot of time. So it's not about more time, more meters necessarily. It's about more focused, consistent, concentrated work with a plan. And I think that for me, philosophically, that's what I try to do. Now, not every kid can buy into that. Not every kid has time for that. And these kids that I coach are students first before they're anything else. And so that, creates limited windows for those people who can't consistently train. And that's why I feel sometimes like I'm limited in things that I can do for certain people. And I got 2 girls that just walked in that aren't these type of people. This is Kara Stark and this is Sarah Manson. Sarah was the one I was just telling you about that played the cello, and Kara I've trained for 5 years. She's trained with us since before summer school. So, what's up?
When our conditioning is canceled today, so
Yes.
do you want us to run around?
Yes. Lactic threshold 25 minutes.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
And then can we do the 1200s tomorrow after school?
I would like you to do the 1200 after school, and then it's 1-to-1 recovery, so it's a VO2.
Okay.
And then that's it. And then you need to talk with Coach Morgan about what you want to do for your distance workout. Cool? All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
So that's how my philosophy developed over time. And then what and it's hard to do, especially in cross country, and it's easy to do in track, but I want it to be more than just the running. I want the sport to be something where people are enjoying it because there's a sisterhood to it. So we have like a big sister, little sister program. We have a secret track buddy. We do team breakfasts before meets. When we're competing, sometimes we do team dinners. We'll do theme days. So the day of a meet, we might have dress nice in tennis shoes. So the kids wear dresses, but they wear tennis shoes. And everybody's like, why are you wearing tennis shoes with the dress? And it gives you an opportunity to tell them, well, we got a track meet today. You should come check us out. Dress like your coach day. You can make fun. No, we didn't have that stuff. And so when you were here, it was more of a focus of train. And now it's more of a focus of, man, I know what I'm doing training-wise. 90% of my program is locked in. 5% of my program I throw out every year because I don't like what I did. Then I replace it with 5% that I really think is something I'd like to try the next year. And then the other 5% is open for the mystery of whatever the season's going to present, whatever the weather's going to be. Hey, a kid comes out and they develop, and now you've got a new opportunity you didn't know about. And you've got to leave that 5% of your program open to be able to make adjustments on the fly, depending on those situations and what you're running into. And you still have the majority of your program. So all that's been set up. So then the little things are more about how do you make running really hard and turning left more entertaining when you're away from the track, and building that family and that community. And that's helped increase our numbers and really improved the time that we've been able to have with our kids as a family and as a community, and a lot of other kids we've been able to retain and keep in our program because of that.
I need the work that yesterday.
And Naomi, you're going to have to get, there was a video that we watched. You'll have to get those notes from one of your classmates. Okay?
Just this?
There's 2 sheets of paper there, crisscross.
I mean, like a robotic voice, that kind of like